It's episode 52 of the Improv London podcast. I'm your host, Stuart Moses, and this week's guest is Duncan Walsh Atkins. Hello, how are you?
I'm very well.
Good. You are also musical director of Showstopper.
That's right.
I can't imagine there's anyone listening to this who hasn't heard of Showstopper, but for anyone that hasn't, or for anyone that you might meet socially, how do you describe the show?
Showstopper is a fully staged musical with everything a musical has. It songs and dances and a story and big characters that happens to be fully improvised, fully made up on the spot, based on audience suggestions.
And you're the musical director?
Yes.
So what's your role within that?
I play piano for most of the shows. I run the musical side of our practice sessions. I organise the musicians. We have up to 3 musicians on stage for any show, so we have quite a large team of musicians to draw on. So I'm responsible for coordinating that and every musical aspect of the show, really.
Just thinking about the musicians, so all the musicians are improvising at the same time?
Yes.
Wow. Does that not make it a lot harder rather than just having one person accompanying the show? There's already a lot going on with people improvising on stage.
Yes, it does make it more challenging. I mean, generally, in all improv, the more people you have involved, the harder it gets, and the more imperative it is that you all listen to each other. I mean, the basic Showstopper principle is one person has an idea, makes an offer, and everybody else follows on and builds on that offer. So the same applies to the musicians as well as the cast. So it's not that we're all playing together, playing over each other, all following different ideas. We're all, in theory, listening to each other and listening to the cast, and all carefully building on each other's suggestions.
Right.
Yes, when it works well.
That implies that sometimes it doesn't work.
It can be messy, things can go wrong, but generally, as long as you're always listening to each other, you can always pull it back.
And so do you ever rehearse just the musicians, or is it always musicians in cast?
I'd say we always rehearse with cast, because the part of the discipline of the musicians is that they listen to the cast and they watch the cast as well, so they pick up on the cast's musical offers, but also follow their body language and their conducting. So it's very much everybody is connected with everybody, in theory. So where in a conventional musical, generally the musical director is the link between the cast and the band generally just follow the conductor and ignore the cast. In Showstopper, the band should be very much connected to the cast as well. And so, for example, when the cast are conducting, so the cast sort of conduct songs very much, with their body language, with their movement, and all the musicians are watching them, in theory, and following them and taking their cues as well.
Wow. So, you take an audience suggestion.
Yes.
What form of suggestion do you take, and has it always been that?
Yes, pretty much from the start. The idea is we get the audience to suggest the setting for the musical, so which may be a location, it might be a country, it might be an era. We often get historical settings of ancient Greece, ancient Rome, medieval England. We might get something very modern, very specific, like Tesco's or Costa Coffee. We might get something utterly weird, like the inside of a snow globe or inside a pickle jar.
Wow.
It might be incredibly vague and general, like America or the future. But yes, that's always the starting point. Is where is the musical set? So it gives us something to work with, a starting point, something where we can start and develop hopefully an exciting story.
Yes. So out of all of those different suggestions that you might get, what are the ones that make you go, yes, this is going to be great?
I'd say anything that's inspiring or evocative. And to be honest, now we've done so many shows, often it's something new. So there are many settings which are exciting and evocative, but we've done them many times. So Wild West or Ancient Rome, things like that are quite exciting and inspiring, and they suggest a lot, but we have done them many times.
Yes.
So we often get the most excited when it's something that's equally inspiring, but we've never done before.
Right.
So what I mentioned just now actually was the inside of a snow globe, which came up at the last year's Edinburgh Fringe, and that was one of the most exciting shows we've done in a while, just because it's just so new and so unusual, but at the same time quite inspiring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How would you translate the inside of a snow globe into a musical cue? Are you leading with the music, or just?
I'll have ideas. I'll make offers like any other improviser. Yes, with something like that, I love settings like that because things like the weather or seasons or different continents, different countries, different eras, obviously have musical suggestions inherent with them.
Right.
I mean, something like a snow globe. I mean, there's been so much music over the years associated with weather and the elements. It's something you can take inspiration from. Yes, I would sort of visualise snow and start playing music that I think suggests snow, and then just see what the singers do with it, and let it just adapt and evolve as people join in with more offers.
Yeah. How do you get to know? I suppose I'm interested in. You've obviously got a kind of a musical vocabulary, lots of different styles. I know, is that just something that's naturally developed, or is that something you've worked on?
You mean me personally, or Showstopper as a whole? I was a musical director on scripted musicals for 10 years before I ever discovered improv. So I have played in lots of different styles. I'm used to matching music to lots of different kinds of drama. I've done a lot of comedy as well. So yes, I've played for jazz bands, folk bands, rock bands, pop tribute shows. And lots and lots of musicals. So yes, it's just been accumulated gradually by experience. I mean, there is no other way really than to just, obviously you can listen to lots of stuff, but really there's no real substitute for just doing it, for just playing lots of music in different contexts, and that's probably the best training for being an improvising musician.
Yeah. I wonder if there's a way in which that translates. If you're just an improviser that isn't playing music, is doing acting roles.
Yeah, be in lots of different kinds of shows. Be in comedy shows, be in tragedies, maybe be in some physical shows. It's a shame a lot of improvisers I've noticed are sometimes held back by a lack of physicality. So they can be brilliant with words, but they don't move very much. You don't often see a lot of great movement in improv shows, and I often wish improvisers would maybe just go on a clowning course, or do some dance classes, or just learn to explore your physicality, because physicality and movement can add so much to improv, and particularly if you're obviously involving music as well. Music and movement feed off each other so much, and a lot of what I play is inspired by the movement of the improvisers I see.
Wow.
So the more you can do as an improviser, the better your improv will be, whether it's musical, physical, scripted or otherwise.
I've never done clowning. It slightly frightens me, but I would like to dance. I would love to be able to dance. I just think that would be a really useful thing. I just feel if I'd learnt to dance, my whole life would have been different.
I think it certainly, like I said, it improves improv so much when people can, even if not necessarily dance very well, but at least move more confidently, move with purpose, move in time, choreograph their movement, and it can make what they're doing look a lot more dramatic, a lot more real, and you can communicate so much with movement, and you can rely less on words and communicate a lot more if you move confidently or expressively. Like I said, it can make such a difference.
Yes. I recently did with Andy Pugsley the Showstoppers Improvers course, which was the most challenging and the most rewarding course that I think I've done in the world of improv. And yeah, one of the things you talked about there when you're singing is fewer words. Let's just have, we don't need, I think improvisers fall into the habit of thinking, right, I can say about 1 million words and then maybe I'll find the right words. Whereas if they're improvising and they're just saying fewer words, or if they're singing, they're saying fewer words, it makes it easier for them and for other people.
I think there's two points there. There's if in our world anyway, in Showstopper, we're trying to create songs that sound like real songs. So really, in terms of using fewer words, we're only really just following basic principles of songwriting. I mean, there are some schools of songwriting that rely on, that are very wordy, that rely on using lots of words. Gibbon Sullivan, for example.
Yes, I want to come back to that in a minute.
Yeah. But actually, a lot of songwriting is fundamentally simple, and songwriters use short, simple phrases, and they use repetition a lot. So we generally encourage that when improvising songs, because that actually makes your song sound more real, more like an actual song, and less like an improvised song. And the other point is, again, going back to how do you communicate other than with words. If you're using too many words, it can be difficult to communicate emotion. Whereas using fewer words in a song enables you to just invest in them more emotionally and just perform more, to musicalize more. You can very often, if you use too many words, then often you can lose a sense of melody or lose a sense of rhythm. Whereas a few words, but with really strong rhythm and really strong emotional commitment, can be a lot more powerful.
Yes.
I would say that's certainly very crucial to our method. Is fewer words.
Fewer words, definitely. So I'm interested in the process. So you've been running various workshops and things like that. How do you decide? You've been doing how long has Showstopper's been going for now? I feel I should have researched this. This is something I should look up, and I can drop it in a minute.
About 9 years.
About 9 years.
It started as a series of workshops in 2008, run by Dylan and Adam, our directors, and it's just grown from there. Went on to do a few shows in pub theatres and a short run at the Edinburgh Fringe that year, and it's just grown from there.
So we've got many years' experience in creating improvised musicals. How did you and Andy decide what you were going to teach for the course that I did recently? How did you identify? We've got 8 weeks and then a showcase. Where did you start?
At the risk of stating the obvious, with the basics. I mean, that's not a difficult choice, because actually most of what we teach in our workshops is just what we work on ourselves all the time anyway. I mean, a lot of what we do comes back to the same basic principles. How do you create a song? How do you create a scene? How do you create a story? How do you generate a character? So most of what we teach in workshops is just what we work on ourselves anyway. So all the song work we did in that course, the opening numbers, we focused a lot on opening numbers. I'd say getting on for half our rehearsal time, practice time, if you like. Rehearsal's a confusing word to use in the improvising context.
Right, yes.
About half of our practice time is probably devoted to opening numbers,
right.
And the first couple of scenes of a show.
Yeah.
So, because so much depends on that. So, like we said before, we get the setting of a show from the audience. So, whether you create a satisfying musical from that setting, so much depends on the opening number and the first two scenes. If you get them right, then you're probably okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I'd say probably about half of our work in our training sessions is focused on that. So that's naturally what we focus on in our workshops as well. Just the basics of how do you create a song, particularly how do you create a song in a group. So we focus a lot, as you remember, in our workshops on group work, on how do you create a song together, whether it's 5 of you, 6 of you, 2 of you. It's a different challenge, obviously, creating a song together than creating one on your own, which I'm not going to say is easy, but has certain advantages over working in a group. So so that's what we do in our workshops generally, just variations of what we do in our own training sessions.
Yes, and I think it's when, and this comes back to a sort of a central idea I have about improv, is that it's when you're working with other people and the things that you can create together are much greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
And it's much harder, but when you can do it, it looks so much more magical. I think people are impressed if you could get up and improvise a song. People go, wow, that was amazing, I couldn't do that. But if you can get up there and just suddenly produce a song that everyone sings, have movement that everyone does, that's when it's...
I think that is, yes, and that's what we've, like I said, done the most work on over the years. It is, as you say, one thing to create a song on your own, but for a group of people to create a song spontaneously that sounds like a real song when they're all actually singing the same chorus and they're all doing the same movement, there is, like you say, something very magical about it, and that's probably the hardest thing to do. So that's what we concentrate on the most in our own training sessions, and again, what we focus on probably the most in our workshops. But it's like you say, it's wonderful when it happens.
Yes, definitely. So are there more courses on the way?
Yes, we're just about to announce some more courses. Our Improvers course that you mentioned before, that you did, and the Beginners course for people who've never done improv before but would like to give it a try.
I think that would be brave to go straight into. Do people think I'm not going to bother with the spoken? I'm just going to go straight into musical improv. I mean, that's...
Well, obviously we do. Obviously, speech and scene work is part of what we do as well. But in some ways, a lot of people imagine the singing side of it must be harder. In some ways, it's easier.
Yeah.
And it's certainly... It's very interesting when we've been teaching improv. We generally find it's the scene work that people struggle with more than the song work, even though the song work may intimidate them more at first.
Right.
But certainly you notice the most immediate improvement with the song work, and it is often the scene work that takes slightly longer. You see a slower, steadier improvement, but the real wow factor of, oh my god, I never knew I could do this, generally comes at first with the songs, and then the scene work can take a bit longer to really master. I mean, obviously depending on people's experience beforehand. I mean, partly it is because we focus so much on the group work. In some ways, a group song is less exposing than a scene, because in a song, with our approach to a group song, you sort of build it step by step, you sing it line by line, you sort of very much invest in other people, rely on other people's offers, repeat what other people have sung. In some ways, it's more collaborative and less exposing, I think. Obviously, when you come to do solo songs, I mean there's a whole level of a whole other level of scary there. But we tend to focus very much on group numbers at first, particularly with beginners, with people who haven't done it before.
Yes, I think that if you tell people that you do improv, they go, oh yeah, okay. But then if you tell them, oh, I do musical improv, it's like suddenly you get a round of applause. Suddenly it's and I don't want to demystify it for these people, but having done some of your classes, that you, as you say, you build it up slowly, and there are techniques, and it's listening and it's paying attention, and it's practice.
Yes, and just confidence. A lot of people have great ideas. Most people who do our workshops have really great ideas. They have a great innate musicality, and they have a wonderful songwriter inside trying to get out. And often the thing that holds people back is just often lack of confidence in their own singing, lack of confidence in their own ideas. But the key is obviously just to believe in your own ideas. So it's very common at first for people to come up with an idea in an improvised song and then back away from it and apologise for it and sort of slightly dissociate themselves from it, and at which point we say generally do that again. Do that again with confidence, without the apology, because it was a great idea. And most people's ideas for songs are great, and they just require a little extra confidence and a little extra investment. But nearly always people have these great ideas in them, and it's just it is just the confidence that's lacking.
And it's confidence and commitment.
Commitment's a good word,
than,
yes, yeah.
More than musical talent.
And certainly more than sort of wit or cleverness or ability with words. I mean, those things are great if you have them, but that's not really that's not the key to it, and that's not essential for creating great songs. I mean, as I said before, I mean, many great songs are fundamentally simple, and songwriting often embraces simplicity. So very often the simpler the idea, the better. Is just the commitment to it that's sometimes lacking. But that's what hopefully we can help with in our workshops.
Yeah, and one of the things I love about musical improv in particular is the way it accesses emotion. It's hard to sing. I think it's hard to sing. Well, first of all, you're making yourself vulnerable by singing.
Yes.
And I think it's easier to express emotion through song than it is through speech.
Yes, I mean, what we like to say is, when we're explaining why you should sing in a musical, improvised or otherwise, is that you get to a point, hopefully, where words are not enough anymore, and you have to sing as the only way you can express the emotion that you're feeling. So it very much relies on, obviously, the dialogue and the scene work to be equally emotional. And I mean, all drama requires emotion, and emotionless scenes are often just not very fun, whether scripted or improvised. Generally, if you're trying to create drama or comedy, there has to be some strong emotion somewhere. Singing probably requires just a little extra degree of emotion, as like I said, to push you past that point where words are not enough anymore. But yes, you really can't create anything that sounds like a real song without a degree of emotional commitment, even if it's meant to be a funny song. And many of our songs and Showstopper are funny and very deliberately funny, but there's still an emotional truth behind them as well.
Yes, I get quite angry when people are told, quite often as children, that they can't sing, and I think that's such a, I don't know, you may not be able to sing well, but I think everyone can sing and should sing in whatever form.
Yes, I've never understood that either, because the best improvisers in the world are children, and in some ways learning to improvise singing is just rediscovering that sort of complete freedom we had to sing and to make up songs when we were younger. My children make up songs all the time with no inhibitions at all, and then gradually as we get older, often somebody tells us we can't sing, we decide we can't sing, we become inhibited socially from spontaneously uttering things, so we only sing in sort of carefully controlled contexts, like I said, a lot of improvised singing is simply just rediscovering that freedom and that joy that the children have. Certainly, I mean, really, no one should be held back from improvised singing by worrying about whether they can sing or not, because actually the quality of your singing is up to a point irrelevant. I mean, it's about this, particularly when you're doing group numbers, it's about creating a song. It's about collaborating to create a song, and you create a song that works for your particular voice and your particular voice type, and so actual singing ability is not really relevant.
Yes. In our showcase, I'll mention Roland's name.
Yes.
Who, I hope you won't mind me saying, is not necessarily the strongest musically, but he played this dashing doctor that all the nurses were falling in love with and were failing to do the operation because they're all in love with him. And I just thought that was one of my favourite things that I've seen on stage for a long time.
Yeah, it was really interesting because his emotional commitment to the song was incredible, and it pushed his voice into places you could tell he'd never sung before.
Yeah.
Certainly, I'd never heard him in all the 8 weeks we've been teaching him. Never heard him sing in that way and use that part of his voice, but it just suited the emotion of the moment. He sort of accessed the sort of the high, sort of Frankie Valli part of his voice, and it sounded amazing, and you could tell it was something he'd never done before. But he just let the emotion of the drama push him that way, and it's wonderful to see that degree of commitment. I did a really fun show. You must have interviewed Steve Rowe for these podcasts. I did a show with him, an improvised opera with himself and an actual opera singer. Steve is not a natural opera singer, but his commitment to being an opera singer for that 1 hour was total and incredible, and it was beautiful to watch. It was so much fun, and it just would not have been entertaining at all without that complete commitment and that sort of complete self-belief for however long it was that he was an opera singer, that he was going to sing in that way.
Can you remember how the idea for that show came about?
I don't know. You'd have to ask. I just got asked to play for it at short notice, but I loved every minute of it.
No, it's nice. I love the way in which improv gives me permission to sing and to dance in public. Perhaps I shouldn't be needed to give permission for those things, but somehow I do.
I think there's a wonderful thing. I think all the showstoppers embrace this of improvising a musical means you can get to play that part that you would never be cast to play.
Yes. Yes, I'd like to be a jet. I'd like to be a jet, if that's all right.
Most of us have an idea of the parts. The parts we'll never play, the parts they would never cast us as, and improvising a musical can enable you to do that, and it's a wonderful thing to watch, to see somebody inhabiting a role that they would never be cast to play, but having 100% commitment to it, and obviously loving every second of it, and it's a wonderful thing to work with.
Yes, I particularly enjoyed playing the baddie in our showcase, which was set in the Great British Bake Off world.
Oh, that was great. Yeah, the sort of the evil judge.
I was just walking around, shouting at people, being horrible, which I do neither in my improvisation or in my real life, and yet somehow it was acceptable and, dare I say it, entertaining.
Yes, it's funny. A lot of improvisers, most improvisers are very nice and helpful people, and there is.
Long may that continue.
But it can sometimes mean that you get a lot of very nice and helpful characters being played, and it's wonderful when people embrace the freedom. And again, in some ways, it's easier in a musical, perhaps, because there are very clear, well-established musical theatre archetypes. When people embrace that freedom to be the villain, to be a high-status character, if they're not necessarily in real life, or to be like you say, to be a thoroughly unpleasant character, because that's actually can be very dramatically helpful.
Yes.
It's wonderful when people just embrace those characters and really enjoy playing them.
Yes, because the other people who you're performing with and the audience, they know you're not really like that.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But there's something about when you really get into doing a musical, so not just doing an improv show, but doing a musical, it creates very obvious need for those sort of characters. It's it can just become very obvious that you get to the next scene, because we have no idea really what's going to happen in any particular scene, but they'll just get to a point where everybody just internally realises we've got to meet the villain now. We've got to meet the king. We've got to meet the love interest. It's very obvious, very often obvious which particular archetype we need to meet, or what sort of scene needs to happen next, or what kind of song we need at this point. That's the beauty of it when it works well. Is you just know instinctively without having to plan or think ahead. So you just know what this moment needs. What need have we created? For what kind of character, what kind of song, what kind of what kind of archetype or plot device. It's wonderful when it just naturally slots into place.
And how do you get better at instinctively knowing when you need a certain plot element? Is that just practice, or is that...
It is just practice, and obviously just being aware of how stories work, how musicals work, obviously watching lots of musicals. It certainly helps that a lot of the showstoppers are also writers as well, so they don't just improvise stories, but they actually write them. Adam Megiddo has written several musicals. Many of our members are also comic writers as well, playwrights as well. Pippa, Ruth and Lucy are also quite well established comic writers. I think sort of having a good sense of story, it just means that in the moment you just instinctively know, so you don't have to think. You don't have to think, oh, well, this has happened, what logically should happen next. It should just be obvious.
Yes.
Hopefully your instincts would carry you through, and you just sense, oh, yeah, this feels like we're heading towards the midpoint, the false victory. It feels like we're heading towards the low point, now we're in the turnaround. Even without actually actively thinking those things, you should just really be able to feel it.
So, if somebody was interested in improvising musicals, you suggest they should watch musicals?
Yeah, if you specifically want to improvise a musical, then obviously yes. A musical is not just a show with some music in it. It's a very specific thing. Musicals use music in certain defined ways, like to express emotions, to introduce characters, to introduce themes and new locations, to move the story on in certain ways. So yes, if you want to improvise a musical, then in the same way, if you were going to improvise Shakespeare, several improvised Shakespeare shows, obviously you would start by reading lots of Shakespeare. So if you want to improvise a musical, I suggest watch a lot of musicals and try being in some as well. Yes, because there's a big difference, like I said, between a musical and a show that happens to have some music in it.
Yes. So, what three beginner musicals for the musical beginner? What would you recommend?
Oh,
I'm asking the tough questions tonight.
I suppose I would pick musicals from different eras, and from. Because you can tell all sorts of stories through a musical. So I would pick one from, like an early romantic comedy musical, sort of light-hearted Cole Porter type thing. So maybe something like Anything Goes. That's a very classic early musical, but a very textbook example of a kind of relationship-based drama, relationship-based comedy.
So how's that? What's? Can you boil down what the style of that would be compared to kind of later?
Well, those musicals of that era are often quite frivolous, and they followed a fairly strict pattern of introducing generally a pair of couples. So you normally saw a young couple at the start of their relationship, and generally an older couple in a well-established relationship, and the story is just generally the story of how those relationships change. Something like Anything Goes or Kiss Me Kate, good examples of that. Kiss Me Kate's one of my favourite musicals, but that shows a young couple at the start of their love. It is just set in a theatre, young couple at the start of their relationship, and an old couple who are actually divorced, so a divorced couple who have been sort of forced to, for box office reasons, to work together again, and it's that classic story. Obviously they're still in love, and obviously they get back together by the end. And there's a sort of very amusing sort of play within a play device where obviously their real relationship comes into their acting relationship, and very standard stuff, but that's one kind of musical. Then, of course, at the opposite end, you have something like Les Mis, which is like dark, epic story. That's essentially a biopic of one. I'm sure most people know what it's about, but it's
about a man who steals a loaf of bread. Yeah, but it gets worse from that point
on. But what's interesting, I think, in understanding how musicals work, is that obviously most people think of the barricade and the revolution when they say Les Mis, and actually you have to remember that in that musical and most others, things like that are slightly incidental. They're really just the backdrop, and the real drama is the relationships and the the story of how relationships change and how people change, and that's why Les Mis is such an effective musical, because it just has very strong relationships within it. You have this very weird relationship between, because a relationship doesn't necessarily mean people being in love. It can mean any family relationships, and at the core of Les Mis you have this very weird, twisted relationship essentially between a former prisoner and his former jailer, who cannot quite get out of each other's lives and each other's heads, which obviously culminates, as everybody knows, in one of those characters not being able to live anymore, to live with himself anymore, when he realises that his pursuit of the criminal has been a mistake, and that actually, I'm the bad guy. But it's a fascinating relationship, and I think having that relationship at the core of the musical is one reason why that musical works as well as it does. And then obviously you do have a young couple in love, and then you do have a father who can't quite let go of his daughter. These very rich, very complex relationships. And then obviously you have the drama of the barricade and the revolution and people dying as well. But the writers never lost sight of what is it really about. And it starts with Jean Valjean at one stage of his life, and then it ends with him at the end of his life, and looking back on the changes he's undergone, and he does never loses sight of what it's really about. And so that it's such a cliche to say Les Mis is the greatest musical ever, but for me it really is. It really is one of the greatest, and I think for that reason, so you have to don't get fixated on barricades and revolutions. Remember what musicals are really supposed to be about.
Yes.
And then maybe another contrast again would be maybe like a really modern sort of relationship-based musical, like something like Fun Home, which has recently closed on Broadway, is going to open here fairly soon.
I don't know about that.
I saw it on Broadway last year, and that was something like that, or Next to Normal, or one of those very modern musicals, because they are unashamedly just about relationships. They have no revolutions, they have no barricades, they have actually very little happening at all.
Right.
But they just have some people in relationships, and those relationships change. Next to Normal is actually a therapy, is about a person in therapy struggling with her relationship with relationships with her family. And Fun Home is the story of a man's relationship with his daughter, and it's told from the daughter's perspective. It's told the three. It's actually the three. The daughter is played by three actresses, sort of young, sort of very, very young, then a teenager, and then an older one. And it's mostly about her relationship with her father, who is a troubled man who ultimately committed suicide. And you're told that right at the beginning, so there's no spoiler there. You're told that right essentially in the first minute of the musical. It's just about how their relationship changes throughout as the girl grows to be a woman, goes away to college, and her father gradually deteriorates, and almost nothing happens.
Right.
It is just that is just it. It is just about the evolution of relationships within a family, and to really understand what musicals are, I would really recommend it.
Right, cool. I went to see Wicked last night.
Yeah, Wicked is an amazing show. And again, I'd say, people remember it for obviously the incredible epic numbers, and then obviously for the flying, but again, I think that works again because of the relation. You have strong relationships there, and not like I said, not obvious ones as well. The relationship between Glinda, the lead. No, not Glinda. I've gone blank. The relationship between the female lead and the wizard, and her fixation with the wizard, and her determination to make the wizard her mentor and to impress him, and then her gradual disillusionment and realization that the wizard is not what she thought.
Yes. She's called something like Elsabet.
Elphaba.
Yes.
But
Yes, no,
Yeah.
that was an interesting, because I knew the songs because I'd had the soundtrack, and then I saw it and thought, oh yeah, no, this makes a lot more sense in the context of it, and actually there's a lot more going on than just the songs. So the songs are very important, obviously, but I was like, oh right, okay. When I found out what the story was, I enjoyed it even more.
But certainly, yes, if you're looking to improvise a musical, that's I think that's what we discovered eventually in Showstopper after many years of experimenting with different approaches. Is focusing on relationships and creating strong relationships and allowing relationships to change and allowing your story to essentially be the story of those changing relationships, so that anything else that might be going on, whether it's a war or a revolution or anything, is not incidental. I mean, but is still crucial. But those things are only important in as much as they impact on the relationships. So again, going back to Les Mis and its revolution, its barricade, that is important to the story, but it's important in how it impacts on those people's relationships. It forces people together, forces people apart, and like I said, the writers never lost touch of what was actually important. A bit similarly to, say, like the war in South Pacific. South Pacific is obviously set in the Second World War, but actually the war is just in the backdrop, and it is crucial because the war has obviously brought disparate people from different backgrounds together, sort of all thrust them together in a slightly weird artificial situation, an army base in the middle of the Pacific, and then the war intrudes at various points to force those characters apart as people get called away, sent on missions or whatever. But it's never about the war, it is only about those relationships.
Yes.
So that I would say, yes, if you want to improvise a musical, that is what to focus on, is the relationships of the story and the emotional changes that people undergo are the story, and that's what generates great songs as well. If you get too fixated on story, on plot and on complicated things happening, that's when things tend to slow down and people get stressed, and it's harder to sing because people are focusing on this has happened to us in Showstopper many times and still happens to us today, but you can get too fixated on what is happening, what should I do, what's the story, and then it's harder to feel anything, and then it's harder to generate songs.
Yes. I can't remember who said it first, but nobody comes away from an improv show going, I'm really glad they fixed that bike.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Fixing the problem is like I said, people discussing what to do or discussing how to fix a problem is not entertaining. And if you look at if you look at great scripted drama, actually there's very little discussion in it. People just generally do things.
Yeah.
They just generally do stuff and the discussion is assumed to have taken place elsewhere.
Yeah.
You don't watch a great heist movie and you don't see people sitting around trying to figure out what to do, and you see them do the heist and you discover what they're doing while they're doing it. And really, good improvised drama is really the same. You discover what's happening while it's happening, rather than figuring it out in advance. But like I said, if the relationships are strong, if the emotions are strong, and if there's enough willingness to change, then really the story will just happen. It becomes, going back to what I said before about things becoming obvious. If you invest in a strong emotion, if you undergo an emotional change, or if you allow your relationship with your scene partner to change, it becomes really obvious what to do, and you find you do the obvious thing without even thinking about it or without discussing it.
Yeah. You're also accompanying the Glenda J Collective?
Yes.
What's that like?
They're amazing. Well, it's two of the Showstopper ladies, two of the founder members of Showstopper, Ruth Bratt and Pippa Evans, Carrie Ann Lloyd, legendary improviser, part of the Ostentatious team, and Josie Lawrence, obviously, as well. And yes, it's an all-female improv group that I have slightly weirdly ended up playing for. I think it was originally imagined they would have a female pianist, but I think I played for a gig when they couldn't get anybody else, and it just seemed to click. And obviously Pippa and Ruth I've worked with obviously for years anyway. We seem to be quite comfortable working together. So yes, that's an amazing show.
So what are the challenges or opportunities. I mean, how is it different from doing a showstopper when you're accompanying a showstopper?
Well, it's not a musical as such. It's very much a free-for-all show. So the ladies get a series of words. They all get one word each from the audience at the beginning. The particular conceit is they ask for in the opening number they ask for their code name. So each performer asks for the audience what their code name is, and it could just be any random word. It could be potato. It could be universe. It could be anything. So
I imagine it's potato fairly regularly.
Potato is a fairly regular
Not
one,
perhaps as often as no potato. No, I was just thinking fruit and vegetables seem to be reasonably.
Common suggestion. Cheese is probably the most common suggestion. Not in Glendale, but it's across my improv experience. So if you ask somebody what's a song about, or what's this show about, cheese is probably the most.
Because I have just been entertained by you saying cheese. So I can see why people think well, it's probably not impossible to do, but there's going to be some fun to be had there.
So in the show. In the Glenda J show, they then take those code words and they just allow those 4 words to inspire songs and sketches for an hour, and with no particular format, with nothing set. It's not. I won't know going into a scene whether that scene's going to lead into a song or not. It might do. It might not. It's amazing the versatility those women have. Because a scene might be deadly serious, it might be quite dark and twisted, it might be incredibly frivolous, it might have no words in it at all. They've done some scenes where they've just sort of made noises at each other, and some scenes go into some quite amazing songs or physical routines, and there's a wonderful freedom to it. It just goes where it goes, and we do one sort of particular musical game in it where there's a radio station, and we ask the audience to say, "Oh yeah, we're going to play that song," or "What was it called?" "Oh yeah, what was it? In what style was it?" And we'll do a few of those. But for the rest, it could just go anywhere.
Wow, cool. Right, now I don't do a lot of research when I'm doing this podcast, but I did do a bit of research for you. And when at university, you were involved with the Gilbert and Sullivan Society. Is this correct?
Yes.
What was the appeal of Gilbert and Sullivan to you? See, I mean, I'm not judging you. That seems an odd society. Maybe that was the most relevant society to your biography on the Showstoppers website.
Gilbert Sullivan, it's just very fun to be in. It's sometimes been said it's more fun to be in than watch. I wouldn't entirely agree if it's done really well, but it's very fun to be in. It's always why it's so popular with amateur societies. I had no particular idea then of doing this for a living or going into musical theatre. Gilbert Sullivan is just, like I said, it's just fun. It's really fun, and it's got a lot for a chorus to do, because I'm not much of a singer, so I never got cast in the lead roles, but it's very fun just to be in the chorus, to be a pirate in Pirates of Penzance, or be one of the Yeomen of the Guard, or a sailor in HMS Pinafore. It's just very fun, and it is very clever. It's wonderful music as well,
but very hard to improvise.
It is. I mean, obviously, we have that particular conceit in Showstopper that we ask the audience to reference musicals or composers, and then we'll do our best to do stuff in the style of those composers, those musicals. And Gilbert and Sullivan is possibly one of the most challenging, simply because it actually runs counter to what I said before. A lot of great songwriting is fundamentally simplistic. Gilbert Sullivan is Gilbert's lyrics are legendarily complex and wordy and have challenging rhyme structures and all that sort of thing. So it's a particularly hard form to improvise in, and obviously the stuff that people like best is obviously like the fast patter songs, which again it just means it is generally, like I said, we encourage people to use as few words as possible when improvising songs and to prioritise prioritise making sense or emotional truth over wordplay, but in improvising Gilbert and Sullivan, you have to slightly turn that on its head. Actually, the clever wordplay is all people want, and they don't particularly care whether they don't really care about the emotional truth of it.
Yes, I particularly enjoyed failing at Gilbert and Sullivan in one of your workshops, where I was like, yeah, I'm glad I've tried that. I hope I never have to do that ever again. Because fast and witty wordplay is not my business. And for most of the time, that's not a problem when it comes to improvising.
It's it just takes practice. I mean, it was. I remember it was the very first genre we worked on. In after I joined Showstopper, just I think particularly, I hadn't particularly set out to coach them. Essentially, I was only really.
Oh, we've looked at his CV. He's got experience at university.
I think it was more that even when I joined, so I wasn't there at the beginning. When I joined, there was already this idea of that we would do songs in the style of whatever the audience suggested, and Gilbert and Sullivan was something that came up a lot. And just because I knew it fairly well, and I suggested we just sort of have a session where we look at Gilbert and Sullivan and distill it down to its main ingredients, and sort of really work on how do you improvise something that could credibly sound like Gilbert and Sullivan, and that was just an obvious one to start with because I knew it so well. But and that was such a fun process to be involved in. That's one of the things that really intrigued me about the whole Showstopper project and really drew me into it. So we went from Gilbert and Sullivan to looking at Sondheim, to looking at Rodgers and Hammerstein, to looking at Andrew Lloyd Webber, and we've never stopped since. It's just that constant sort of that constant process of delving into particular styles and working out what their crucial ingredients are, and how do you improvise something that the audience will recognise, because it's not just you can't just do it to your own satisfaction. You've got to be able to do it to the point where the audience will go, oh yeah, that sounds like. So you have to think about not only analyse it academically, but also just think, okay, what will the audience recognise? What will make the audience sit up and go, and you can tell very quickly whether you've got that. There are certain sort of sounds, certain reactions the audience have that make it very clear that they see what you're doing, and they've acknowledged that you've got it. And just sometimes, if you don't get that, then you have to go back and say, okay, why didn't that land? Why didn't the audience recognise that as being like Gilbert and Sullivan, Andrew Lloyd Webber, or whatever? I mean, it's something like, okay, if the genre was particularly obscure, then maybe they just...
Do you sometimes get that?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, and people deliberately give us obscure suggestions sometimes just to try and catch us out. But in some ways... yes, I mean, because in the end, if a musical only ran for 1 week on Broadway in 1972, it's probably unlikely we'll have heard of it. But then the problem is the only person who does know what it sounds like is the person who suggested it. And certainly in the early days, we got caught out all the time. So it's been a very slow process of just hopefully building up our knowledge, hopefully to the point where we can't get caught out. At least we can't get caught out by anything that the majority of the audience would be familiar with. There are plenty of embarrassing moments in the early years. I completely failed to recognise the name Judy Stein once, which is incredibly embarrassing, in one of my early Showstoppers. And of course, he's actually a major American musical theatre composer, wrote Funny Girl most famously, and actually I did know a lot of his material. Obviously, Funny Girl, Don't Rain on My Parade, obviously I knew that sort of thing, but actually just failed to recognise the name and had no idea what this person was talking about. So that was when I realised afterwards, that was mortifying. But yeah, it's a fascinating process, but it never ends, because there are always new composers emerging, new musicals coming out, so we're always having to work hard to stay on top of the material.
Yeah, stay ahead, yes. You've been practicing, I suppose you've been practicing Hamilton for a while now. I'm just thinking, is there going to be an increase in Hamilton suggestions when it comes to London?
Actually, it couldn't increase. Since Hamilton became as famous as it has in the last sort of year and a half. Actually, it's a suggestion in pretty much every show we do.
Really?
So, actually, yes. You think yes? Unless we have to do it twice in a show, it couldn't actually be any more common than it is. But then Hamilton it's very rich. I mean, if you don't know it, people listening, it's a hip hop musical set about the American Revolution and one of the founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton, it's an incredibly imaginative and clever score, and it's one we have no problem exploring over and over again. There's always sort of different approaches to take, different ideas you can use. It's I mean, with some musicals, some composers, there's really only one thing you can do that people are going to find. Again, like I said, it comes back to being recognisable.
Yeah.
And sometimes really there's kind of only one thing to do, one gag to play. That is basically that is going to be recognisable for that composer or that musical. But somebody like a really imaginative and inventive and original composer like Lin-Manuel Miranda. There's always something new to do. There's always infinite possibilities. A bit like working with Sondheim or somebody like that.
Brilliant. Okay, so last big question. What would you like the future to hold for you? In an improv sense, or a performing sense? Are there things you'd like to do more of?
I'd always like to do more Showstopper. I mean, hopefully, I think we're all very hopeful that we can build Showstopper to the point where it is our major source of work. Essentially, a full. Or we can do as much of it as we want, because we all do other projects and we all enjoy our other work. But Showstopper is still very much growing and I think it's going to be for most of us our top priority for the near future. And I'd like to do more. I'd like to teach more of it. I've only recently started teaching improv, and I would like to. Yeah, I think there's a lot more to discover there, a lot more to explore. Yes, certainly want to do a lot more of that, and to actually write musicals as well. So there's actually a couple of musicals I've been working on in the last few years, actual scripted musicals. So I'd like to see some of them mature and get on stage. Just keep exploring the twin worlds of improv and musical theatre.
I made this.
That's improv!